Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hello dear students, welcome to another lecture. So in the last video, we had read about Anne Frank's changing feelings for Peter. She thought that probably Peter was falling in love with her because they loved to spend time with each other and they were enjoying each other's company. So we are going to now start reading from the 14th of March 1944. I am sitting at the Van Dance table with a handkerchief covering my nose and mouth. Let me start at the beginning. The people who supply us with food coupons have been arrested, so we don't have fats and oils. Meep and Mr. Coupuis are ill and Ellie has no time to do shopping. So the food is miserable, as are we. Lunch today consisted of mashed potatoes and some smelly, rotting vegetables, and that is why I am wearing the handkerchief. To tell you the truth, the food would not matter so much if life here were more pleasant. But the life in hiding during the 4th year of war is no picnic. Mr. M, the man who sells us potatoes, butter and jam on the black market, has also got arrested. He has 5 young children and another baby coming. So she tells us about 14th of March, where she begins by writing that she was sitting at the dining table and she had a handkerchief that was covering her nose and her mouth. There are 2 moments, there are 2 reasons why we cover our nose and our mouth with a handkerchief. Either when we feel we are having cold, or when there is a foul smell, a bad smell that is there around you. So, she tells us the reason by saying, let me start at the beginning. So, the people who had given them or who would give them the food coupons, they had been arrested. And they had no fat, no oil. So, no butter, no oil, no clarified butter, nothing did they have. Meep and Mr. Coupuis were both ill to provide them with anything. And Ellie had no time to go for shopping. So, the food was miserable. It was very bad, as are we. So, she says, just like us, the food was also very bad. Today, that is 14th March, their lunch was of mashed potatoes. There was some smelly, rotting vegetables. Some vegetables which were so old that they had a very bad smell coming from them. So, smelly, rotting vegetables, and that was the reason why she was covering her mouth and her nose with a handkerchief, because of that bad smell that was there. To tell you the truth, she says that, the food obviously would not have mattered that much if the life inside the secret annex was better. But just because the life was bad, the food was also bad, they did not like anything at all. But life in hiding, she says, during the 4th year of the war was no picnic. So the war had been going on for 4 years, and she said that in this 4th year, the life because of that war was very bad. You cannot even think about it. Mr. M, the man who would supply them the potatoes, butter and jam on the black market, he also was arrested. And she tells us that Mr. M had 5 young children, small children, and there was another baby who was going to come. Sunday, the 19th March, 1944. Yesterday was a great day for me. I had decided to talk with Peter. After lunch, I went to his room. We stood in front of the window and talked as it grew dark. It's easier to talk in the semi-darkness than in the broad light. So yesterday, she says, was a very good day. Why? Because she decided that she's going to talk to Peter about her feelings and his feelings for her. After lunch, she went to his room and they were standing in front of the window. And they kept on talking even after it got dark, even after it grew dark. She says that it was easier to talk to somebody in the semi-darkness, not the complete darkness, not the complete brightness, but semi-darkness, than in a broad daylight. So, unless somebody was there in the broad daylight, if you had to talk to someone in the semi-darkness, it was still okay. We told each other so much. It was the most wonderful evening I have ever had in the annex. We talked about our problems with our parents. We talked about how when I'm miserable, I cry my heart out in bed. He goes up to the loft and swears. We talked about everything possible about our feelings and ourselves. It was just as I thought it. So, they talked about a lot of things with each other. She says that it was a very wonderful evening. It was rather the most wonderful evening that she has had at the annex. She says that she talked about her problems with Peter and Peter shared his problem with her. They talked about their parents. They talked about the fact that, when Anne Frank would feel miserable, whenever there were moments when she would feel very bad, she would cry. When before sleeping, she would cry in her bed. Now, Peter also told the same thing, that even he, went up. He climbed a few more stairs so that he would go up the loft, the place which was like a sill, and he would cry, and he swore onto that. So he swears means he says all the bad things that he can when he's feeling bad. They talked about everything possible, about their feelings, about themselves, and she says that it made me feel just the way I had thought. The way, the light-hearted you feel when you just speak whatever is there deep inside your heart. This is what she felt. We also talked about the year 1942 and how different we were back then. Neither of us liked the other at first. He thought I was a noisy pest and I'd quickly concluded that he was uninteresting. So they both talked about the year 1942, so the year when they had actually come to live together at the secret annex. So she says that we talked about it and how different we were in that year. Neither of us, so neither did Anne like Peter, nor Peter liked Anne. Peter thought that Anne was a noisy pest, that she was somebody who kept on talking, she was somebody who kept on creating nonsense noises, and she could be heard all the time of the day. On the other hand, according to Anne Frank, Peter was very uninteresting. He was not an interesting person, he was very boring. I told him that we are like two sides of the same coin. I'm noisy and he's quiet, but that I too liked peace and quiet. I understand how it feels when his parents fight and told him how much I'd like to help him during such times. So Anne Frank told him that we are the two coins, the two sides of the same coin. The two sides of the same coin, we have heads and tails, the two opposite edges, the two opposite sides. So Anne Frank said that I am noisy. On the other hand, you are very quiet. But she confirmed, she clarified by saying that I also like a lot of peace and silence around me. She also told Peter she knows how he must be feeling when his parents keep on fighting with each other the entire day. And she also told him that if she would, then she would really like to help him. There were times when she really wanted to help him in those difficult, duration. But you're always a help to me, he said. How? I asked, greatly surprised. Because you're always cheerful. So Peter said that, no, you always do help me. You are always very, very helpful to me. And Anne Frank was very surprised. She did not know what she had done because of which, Peter was being helped by her. So she asked how. And Peter told her that the reason and the way you help me is by being cheerful. You are always cheerful, and that is what really boosts me. It gives me the energy in the most difficult times. That was the nicest thing he said all evening. It was wonderful. I think he loves me as a friend now, and that's enough for the time being. I am so happy and grateful. So she says that was the nicest thing, the most wonderful thing that he had said in the evening. It was very wonderful. It was very nice. She really liked it. And she said that I think even he loves me as a friend, and that was all she wanted at that time. She was feeling very happy and she was very thankful because she finally had somebody to talk to. March 22, Wednesday. Things are getting more and more wonderful here. I think that true love may be happening in the annex. Everyone has been making jokes, saying that if we stayed in the annex long enough, Peter and I might get married. Maybe the jokes are not so silly after all. Not that I am thinking of marrying him, mind you. I don't even know what he'll be like when he grows up, or if we'll even love each other enough to get married. So for 22nd March, she writes that things inside the annex were getting more and more wonderful. According to her, she thought that, there was some true love that was springing in the annex. Everyone in the house was making jokes on these two kids. They joked, they mocked at them, that if they stayed in the annex was long, for a very long time, that if they are going to be in the annex for a long time, then maybe Anne Frank and Peter will get married. Anne Frank to this would say that the jokes are not very silly after all. She but clears that I am not going to marry Peter. I have got no plans to marry him because I don't know how he is going to look when he grows up. Moreover, she does not even know whether they are going to love each other to the extent of getting married. I am sure now that Peter loves me too. I just don't know in what way. Does he only want a good friend or maybe a sister? But when I think about Saturday evening for the first time, I feel satisfied with myself. I would not change a word of what I said. So she says that I know even Peter loves me. I just don't know in what way. So she knew that Peter loved her, but how, with what feelings did he love her? Only as friends or maybe even as sisters. So she says that when on Saturday evening for the first time it was that Peter, remember Saturday evening we had read when they spent time with each other and Peter said some of the very nice things about her. So she said that was the time when I was very happy, very satisfied with myself. And she says that I am going to stick on to my words and will not change what I had said. Thursday, 27th March 1944. Things are more or less back to normal here. Our black market ration book men have been released from prison, thank goodness. Yesterday a plane crashed nearby. It crashed on top of a school, but luckily there were no children inside. There was a small fire and a couple of people were killed. As the crew got out of the plane, the Germans shot them. The locals who saw it nearly exploded with anger at the cowardliness of such a deed. We were also scared out of our wits with the noise, but I hate the sound of the gunfire. So Thursday, 23rd of March, Anne Frank says that things are more or less back to normal. So the things were getting okay. Remember, we had read the people who used to give them food from the black market, they were all arrested. So the things were getting better. The ration book that they had from the black market, that, the people who would give them the ration, they were also released, they were free, and now they could get their, their daily things, their groceries. Yesterday, she tells us that there was an aeroplane that crashed nearby. Now, that aeroplane had crashed on the top of a school building. But she says that it was the most fortunate thing that there was no child in the school. Now, the local police or the local people who had seen this aeroplane crash, they nearly exploded with anger on the cowardliness of such a deed. So, cowardliness of such a deed, this act of crashing the plane on the top of a school was considered to be very shameful. If you're killing the adults, that is still okay in a war, but killing the children is something which is not accepted by anyone. So they found it to be very, very bad, very selfish. Also, she said that I was personally very scared of all the sounds that I could hear. And what sounds were there? These were the sounds of a gunfire. So there was a gunfire being loaded and pulled up at people. Tuesday, 28th March 1994. Mother has forbidden me to go to Peter's room. She says it's because Mrs. Van Daan is jealous. But so many difficulties. He and I have so many difficulties, but I think we would overcome them. That will make it more beautiful in the end. When he lays his head on his arms and closes his eyes, he's still a child. When he plays with Mushi, his cat, he's loving. When he carries the potatoes or every other heavy loads, he's strong. When he's awkward and clumsy, he's hopefully adorable. So she tells us that her mother had forbidden, she was not allowed to go to Peter's room. And the reason she gave was that if Mrs. Van Daan would see you going to his room so often, she is going to feel jealous. Okay, she will not like it that my son is talking to somebody else. Father, however, thinks it is nice we get along so well. So there were two opinions. The mother felt that he was totally useless and was not worth her. On the other hand, her father had felt that they both looked great together and he had no issues with it. Mother thinks that Peter is in love with me. To tell you the truth, I wish he were. He and I have so many difficulties, but I think we will overcome them. That will make it more beautiful in the end. When he lays his head on his arms and closes his eyes, he's still a child. When he plays with Mushi, his cat, he's growing. When he carries the potatoes or other heavy loads, but he's strong. So she tells us that, Peter was always surrounded by a lot of responsibilities, and now he had brought home another responsibility, and that was she told about the fact that she was very caring and very lovable about the cat that they had with them, and that they both shared the responsibility of, lessening the burden that they had on their hearts. So Peter would listen to Anne Frank very patiently, and Anne Frank would in turn listen to Peter. Anne Frank simply felt that although they were not allowed to meet each other a lot, but Anne Frank just hoped that Peter is going to talk to her. So she was just happy that at the end it is all going to be okay. So she tells us that when he lies on the bed with his head over his hand, and he closes his eyes. He looks like a child. She also tells that when he plays with his cat Mushi, he looked very loving, he looked very affectionate. She also tells us that she found Peter to be very strong when she would see him carry the potatoes or the other heavy things. When he goes to watch the gunfire, or when he walks through the house which was very dark, to look for the burglars, for the thieves, she was obviously brave. When he's awkward and clumsy, he's hopelessly adorable. So not only has she highlighted all the positive things, being brave, then closing his eyes and looking like a child, and then playing with a cat Mushi and being a playful child, she's told us about the fact that he was awkward, he looked very strange though, and he was very clumsy, somebody who's not very particular about the cleanliness aspect about them. So she said that whenever he was awkward and whenever he was clumsy, she found him to be very adorable. She found him to be loving. She found him to be very sweet. Okay. Wednesday, 29th March 1944. Mr. Bolkestein, the cabinet minister, made an announcement on the Dutch broadcast from London. He said that after the war, a collection would be made of diaries and letters written during and about the war. Everyone, of course, thought of my diary. Maybe I could also write a novel about the secret annex. The title would make people think it was a detective story. Seriously though, 10 years after the war, people would find our lives very amusing. How we Jews in hiding lived, what we ate and talked about. There is so much that I don't write down here. For instance, about how frightened the women are during the air raids. Last Sunday, 350 British planes dropped 550 tons of bombs on Ijmuiddin. The houses trembled like blades of grass in the wind. Or about the terrible diseases people are catching here. So she tells us that Mr. Bolkestein, who was the cabinet minister at that time, he made the announcement on the Dutch radio in London, from London rather. He said that after the war gets over, anybody who's written any diary, any letter, everything is going to be collected as an evidence, as a testimony of the war. At that time, once this rule was passed, everyone in the house thought about Anne Frank's diary because they knew that it was only Anne Frank who recorded things in her diary. She thought that people believed this novel, this story that she was writing to be a detective story. Seriously, she tells us that, she feels that 10 years from now when the war is going to, it is just going to end, when people are going to read her work, they will feel that Jews were so amusing, that they were so, entertaining. They found it so funny. How we Jews lived in, what we ate and how we talked about. So she thought that everybody is going to read about us, about our stories, and are going to laugh at the ways we had survived. Last Sunday, she said there were 350 British planes that were dropped and approximately 550 tons of bomb that were dropped at Ijmuiddin. She tells us that when this bomb blast took place, whatever houses she could see, they all started to shake just like the blades of grass. So just like the grass is so light and it would shake even with a slight movement of air, the houses were shaking. Or about the terrible diseases. So not only because of she was not only thinking about herself and the house, but also because of the children who were suffering. People have to stand in line to buy vegetables and all kinds of goods. Doctors can't visit their patients since their cars and bikes are stolen from the moment They turn their backs. Burglaries and thefts are so common that you ask yourself what has gotten into the Dutch to make them such thieves. So she further tells us that things were not very good. The peoples were standing in lines to buy the vegetables and whatever things they had required. The doctors were not willing to visit their patients because their motorcycles, their cars, everything was stolen. And burglaries, people who would enter your house and would steal away your belongings, they were also there, and everybody was wearing out. Everybody was very tired of all these things. They did not like it at all. So burglaries and thefts were very common. Little children who were 8 and 11 years old, they would smash the windows of the people's home. Such young kids who probably just enter the school at this early age, they have learned to break the windows of these houses and steal whatever they can. People, they do not have the courage, they do not have the capacity to leave their house even for 5 minutes, because they know that after 5 minutes they will not be able to get anything at all. And even the electric clocks that were given to them, they were not safe. So there were electric clocks, there were cameras which were there on the corner streets, in the public phones, they were also not safe. Everyone's hungry. A week's food ration does not last for 2 days. The Allied invasion seems so far. The men are being sent off to Germany. The children are being sent or undernourished, and everyone's wearing old, worn out clothes and shoes. So he tells us that everybody in their vicinity, in their surroundings, they were all very, very sad and they were all hungry. Now a week had passed, and whatever food they had brought for themselves, hoping that they will be able to eat it in 1 week, they were able to finish that in 2 days. The Allied invasion, the attack over the Nazis by the Allied forces, by its opponents, did not seem to take place anytime soon. The men of the family, they were being sent to Germany. The children, they were either sick, they were unwell, or they were undernourished. They did not have the nourishment, since they were not eating correct, so obviously there wasn't anything good going inside their bodies. And everybody was wearing old clothes which were worn out, which had become very, very old. They had started to tear. Their shoes, their clothes, everything had become very old and bad. Shoe repair is expensive. They could not get their shoes repaired. Moreover, if you would give your shoes to a mender, if you would give your shoes to a cobbler, somebody who might repair it, you may never see them again. Since the people were so poor, they had lost their resources. So if you would give something to somebody, they did not return it back to you. Now 31st March 1944. Just imagine, it's still cold and most people don't have anything to put on their fire and keep them warm. Sounds awful, doesn't it? People are optimistic about the battle at the Russian front. The Russians have reached the Polish border and the Prut River in Romania. But Hungary had been occupied by German troops. There are still 1 million Jews living there. I think they are doomed now. So for 31st March, she tells us that imagine, even though we are in the month of March, but it was still very cold and the people did not have anything that they could burn in order to derive warmth. Sounds awful, doesn't it? So she says, are you not feeling bad for us? Isn't it sounding bad? Now, people were optimistic. People were thinking positively about the battle that was taking place at the Russian front. So, at the war was taking place, the battle. So, they were all hoping that that battle will prove to be good for them. The Russians had reached the Polish border and the Prut River in Romania. So, the Russians had managed to reach the border and Romania's Prut River. But Hungary also had been occupied by the Germans. So, if the Allied forces were moving ahead and getting hold over the other countries, even the Germans were not lagging behind. And there were many Jews who were living in Hungary. So she said there were many Jews who were living in Hungary, and I know that they are doomed now. That I am very sure that they all must have died by now. Nothing special is happening here. Today is Mr. Van Dan's birthday. He received lots of presents and a cake. It was not perfect because of the poor quality of the ingredients, but it was still delicious. So she tells us that inside the annex there wasn't anything special which was taking place. It was Mr. Van Dan's birthday. He received a lot of presents and he received a cake for himself. It was not a very perfect cake because of the poor ingredients that were used to make the cake. But since they had eaten one after a long time, it was very delicious. They have stopped talking about me and Peter now. We are very good friends. We spend a lot of time together and talk about every imaginable subject. It's so nice that I don't have to hold anything back from him. He thinks we women are quite strong. I wonder why. So she tells us that people inside the house, they've stopped talking about me and Peter. They are not teasing us anymore. Me and Peter are very good friends. We spend a lot of time together and every imaginable subject. You think of a topic and we talk about it. She also says that I feel very good because there isn't anything that I'm supposed to hold back from him. There's nothing that I need to hide from Peter. He thinks that women are very strong. And Anne says, I wonder why. Why do people believe that women are so strong? My life here has gotten better, much better. God has not left me. He never will. So Anne Frank says that my life at the secret annex has got very much better. And I know that God is never going to leave my side. He's always going to be there by me and with me. Monday, the 3rd April 1944. I'm going to write about the food situation here since it's become a problem not only here in the annex but in all of Holland and Europe. In the 21 months we've lived here, there have been many times during which we had only one type of food to eat, one kind of vegetable or salad. We would eat it in every possible form or combination. Now there are no vegetables at all. So 3rd April, she writes to us, she tells us about the food situation which was prevailing. She says that since they have been living at the annex for 21 months now, it was a very big problem. So it was not only a problem that the people living in the secret annex were facing, but in the entire Holland and Europe. Because of the war, there was food shortage. So she says that, in all these 21 months that they've been living in the secret annex, there were times when they had only one type of food to eat. Only one kind of a vegetable they would eat or salad. And she said that when we had one vegetable only, we would eat it in every form or combination. We would cook it in every possible manner so that the taste would change and we would eat that more comfortably. But now, she says, we've reached the time when there is no vegetable available at all. Our weekly lunch consists of brown beans and potatoes. We have soup and little packages of other things that make lunch more interesting. But it's mostly brown beans with everything, including bread. She says that our lunch, what do we have for lunch? They had brown beans and potatoes. They had soup and they had small packages of the other things, because of which the lunch would be made a little interesting. But they had brown beans that they were supposed to eat with everything. Even with the bread, they would eat the brown beans. The high point of the week is when we get a piece of sausage and jam with our bread. But what matters is that we are still alive. And much of the time, the food still tastes good. She tells us that the high point of the time comes, the most difficult situation, when they get a piece of sausage and jam with their bread. But the only thing that mattered to them was the fact that they were still alive. And because of that feeling of happiness, because of that feeling of being proud and grateful and thankful to God, they liked whatever they would eat, because that was the biggest gift that anybody could have given them, the gift of being alive. So my dear students, with this I'm going to pause now. From our next video, we'll start to read what happened with them on 5th of April. I hope whatever we've read so far and covered in whatever lectures, whatever videos have been recorded so far is all clear to you. So I'll see you all now in my next lecture. Thank you.